Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the official launch of the Children's Voices for Change project outputs and the Change Children's Feedback Tool. I'm Dr. Georgina Demopoulos of Southern Cross University, and I'm joined by Tash, Liam, and Lachlan, who are three members of our Young Advisory Group and co-researchers on this project. We'll begin with an acknowledgement of country and an acknowledgement of our collective accountability to children and young people. I'll then give a brief overview of some of the key findings from the Children's Voices for Change project and introduce the Change Children's Feedback Tool. We'll then move into a panel conversation with Liam, Lachlan, and Tash, followed by a Q&A. Thanks, Tash.
So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of land that we're all kind of joining this meeting from today, including the Bunjalung, Wurundjeri, Yugambeh, Gumbaynggirr, and the Gunai Kurnai nations. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and also acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. Thank you.
Thanks, Tash. Tash and I are just now going to talk about whose voices were heard and unheard in this project and the importance of us all being accountable to children and young people.
So I just want to begin by acknowledging the lived experience that was involved for the Voices for Change project, the lived experiences of children and young people who experienced and are accessing family violence, and that's both living and lived experience. But I'd also like to acknowledge that we are also missing voices from this project, including Aboriginal voices and other culturally and linguistically diverse voices, as well as disability and other areas. And that it's important that when we're translating this research to keep in mind that this is the case, and to really keep in mind that we need to keep doors open and making sure that we're speaking directly to community. I'll pass to you, Georgina, for anything else.
Thank you, Tash. That was great. So the Children's Voices for Change project was funded by the Victorian Government through Phase 1 of Family Safety Victoria's Family Violence Research Grants program to address the priority children and young people as victim survivors in their own right. It's been led by Southern Cross University in partnership with Safe and Equal and the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare, researchers from Swinburne University of Technology, and supported by Berry Street's Why Change Lived Experience program. As Tash mentioned, I need to highlight from the outset the children and young people who generously shared their time, their expertise, their insights, and their experiences. And it's these children and young people who have made this research possible. On behalf of the project team, I thank the 23 children and young people who took part in the children's activity. I thank Lachlan, Geordie, and Zaid, who took part in the collaborative workshops to develop the Children's Feedback Tool, and our Youth Advisory Group members, Kira, Tash, Liam, and Millie, who continuously shared their wisdom and guidance throughout the project. We also thank the 320 practitioners in Victoria who responded to the survey to share their perspectives and experiences working with children and young people, and members of our project advisory group, Aileen Ashford, Rachel Carson, James McDougall, and Meena Singh, for their valuable practice insights and their expertise that guided the design, delivery, and outputs of this research. I'd also like to personally thank my fellow project team members, Eliza Hugh, Harrison Cant, Holly Aitken, and David Wang from Southern Cross University, Mitchell Adams from Swinburne University, Louise Sims and Ella Longhurst from Safe and Equal, and Michelle Lonsdale and Mandy Charman from the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare, as well as Becca Percy and Shakira Branch for their wonderful support of the Youth Advisory Group. This project engaged children and young people as family violence experts by experience, as research participants, as co-researchers, and as youth advisory group members to enhance our collective understanding of the diversity and distinctiveness of children's experiences of family violence and the effectiveness of services in meeting their needs. The project reviewed the existing Victorian family violence service landscape and analysed data from the Orange Door to understand children's system pathways. It surveyed 320 practitioners who support children who have experienced family violence. It conducted research with 23 children and young people who have accessed family violence services in Victoria, and also co-created a children's feedback tool through collaborative workshops with children, young people, and practitioners. I'd like to share with you the project's 6 key findings. The first one being that there is no one-size-fits-all for supporting children and young people who have experienced family violence. The project also has shown that children who experience intersecting forms of oppression and marginalisation face greater barriers to accessing family violence supports and having their needs met. Children and young people who took part in this project told us that they need connection, trust, and loving relationships with their family, friends, and their pets to help them to heal from family violence. Children and young people also want to make sure that they and their family members are safe, healthy, and well, and that they have financial security and housing stability. Another key finding of this project is that it's critically important to build and maintain trust between the child and their practitioner. Children and young people described services breaching their trust by disclosing information to others, by not understanding their experiences of family violence, and through police actions, including where police had seemingly sided with the person using violence, where children were perceived to be lying about their experiences of violence, and where police actions were seen to undermine their safety or hadn't adequately responded to their situation. The fourth key finding is that asking children for feedback about their experience of services is not common practice in Victoria. So less than half of the practitioners we surveyed, 46%, said that their service seeks feedback from children. And where children do give feedback, this is usually through an adult, such as the child's parent or carer or caseworker, and it happens only at the end of the service interaction. The project findings have exposed many ongoing barriers to supporting children as victim survivors of family violence in their own right in Victoria. The main one being that the specialist family violence service system is insufficiently resourced. So practitioners and children alike told us about their concerns over long wait times to access services, staff shortages and high staff turnover, a lack of specialised programs for children, case management periods that were too short, and concerns about practitioner expertise and confidence to work with children. Another systemic barrier is family law parenting orders that often make it hard for services to help children or put children at risk of harm. The need for parental consent for a child to engage with services is another barrier that came through in this research, where parental consent can be used by the person using violence to prevent children's access to support. Children and young people told us that financial support and housing stability were key unmet needs for them. And also, we found out that services don't always collaborate and communicate effectively to ensure that important risk information about children is shared and acted upon. Now, finally, a finding that's probably the simplest to articulate and the most challenging to implement in practice is that services and systems must listen to, hear, and understand children. The research has emphasised that we need to seek children's direct, unfiltered voices about their family violence response and recovery needs to be able to meet those needs effectively. I present you here with a number of quotes and statements from young people who took part in this research, emphasising the importance of the act of listening. So Arthur has said, listen to kids because we don't make this stuff up. And Molly said, start listening. Don't think you know. You can't see us as victims in our own right unless you actually listen. So how do we translate children's voices into practice? Here I introduce the change guiding principles. And these principles have emerged from a synthesis of the findings across all 4 phases of this project. They embrace child-centred, trauma-informed and rights-based approaches to engaging with children in different service contexts. The first principle is create space and time. So give children enough time and create a safe space tailored to the needs of each individual child to enable the child to give meaningful feedback. And this is about the importance of child-inclusive spaces and practitioners dedicating time at the beginning of service engagement to build rapport and to understand how each child prefers to engage. The second principle, hear the child, involves active listening so that the child feels that their voice, views and experiences are being heard and understood. And this process of listening to and hearing the child forms a really key part of children's ongoing participation. The third principle is to act on feedback. So this is for practitioners and services to be accountable to the child by clearly communicating how their feedback will be used and actioned in relation to the child themselves and also for ongoing service improvement. And acting on feedback also requires adults to respond to the particular type of support the child needs, which might be action-oriented rather than talk-based. So Lisa, aged 11 in our project, said, I don't just want to talk about what's going on, I want real help. Principle 4 is navigate trust. And this is about getting to know the child to establish a rapport built on transparency, understanding, safety, and mutual respect. And this is essential for the child to feel safe to engage in support and also involves services following through on the support that they've promised. A young person involved in co-analysing the data with the research team explained, trust is a hard thing to build. It takes a long time, but it can be destroyed in an instant. Just having one person you can trust is life-changing. The fifth principle is to give children choice and agency. This is about providing the child meaningful opportunities to participate in decisions about their family violence response and recovery, consistent with their age and their evolving capacities, and also with appropriate guidance and direction. As one young person told us, it's about being able to choose something when everything else is out of control. And the sixth principle is explain enough and ensure understanding. So give the child sufficient accessible information about the support that's being provided to them and the feedback that's being collected from them. It's also important to clearly explain any privacy and confidentiality limitations, including what will be done with the information that the child shares and its connection with any mandatory reporting obligations and child information sharing schemes. It's also about being transparent about what you can and can't do to support the child. So here I've provided a link to the project reports. This website presents the interactive web report, the final report, a summary report, and also a link to the Change Children's feedback tool that I'll introduce, and it's my pleasure to officially launch now. The Change Children's feedback tool, as I mentioned earlier, brings together the findings from all 4 phases of this project. It has been created alongside and informed by the insights, experiences, and ideas of children and young people with lived experience of family violence. The tool is a practical, interactive resource for practitioners, for organisations and government agencies working with children and young people who have experienced or are experiencing family violence. And the aim is to help children to give feedback about their service experience in a meaningful and a safe way. And here I'll give a shout out to my colleague, Dr. Mitchell Adams, for his tech expertise in developing the website that hosts this tool. There are 4 parts to the tool. There are the change guiding principles, which I've stepped you through. There is the 4 F's feedback loop: first, frequent, final, and future. That supports opportunities for children to provide feedback at key stages of their service engagement. And at each point in that feedback loop, children have opportunities for self-reflection, so to consider and communicate what they're thinking, how they're feeling, and their experiences that relate to their family violence recovery journey, and also opportunities for service reflection. So for children to be able to consider and communicate their experiences of engaging with the service. The Change Children's Feedback tool provides printable and editable activities that children can do with their practitioner to give feedback at each stage of the feedback loop. The third part of the tool is the practice pointers, and they serve to support practitioners and services to apply the tool in their own service context. These pointers, there are 6 of them, are: be flexible and inclusive, be trauma-informed, be aware of complex family dynamics, be child-centred, be mindful of power imbalances, and be ready. And accompanying these practice pointers is a readiness checklist to enable services to reflect on their readiness to receive and action feedback from children and young people. Now, the tool is intended to be accessible and engaging for practitioners and children and young people alike. So each section has short videos that feature the voices of children and young people who took part in this project, sharing why each stage and why each principle and each stage of the tool is important. So I hope that this tool will be valuable in your own practice setting to enable children's voices to be meaningfully embedded in ongoing service improvement and also capability building for practitioners. So with that, it's time for our panel conversation, our Voices for Change, which will be moderated by Tash and will feature Liam, Lachlan and myself in conversation.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so we're onto the panel now. So I've just had to change locations, so sorry for the different background. But I first wanted to start by just a round of introductions for everyone. I'll start first, and then I'll pass on to the next person, and then we'll just go around. So I'm Tash. I use she, they pronouns. And yeah, I'll pass on now to Liam.
Thanks, Tash. So my name's Liam. I use he, him pronouns. I'm 17 years old, and I've got lived experience, I suppose. I'm a child survivor. I'll pass on to Lachlan.
Hi, I'm Lachlan. I'm 12. I use he.
And then Georgina. You already know who you are, but
Hi, and everyone. I use she, her pronouns, and I've had the pleasure of working with Tash, Lachlan, and Liam on this project.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. So jump straight into the first question. And the first question is, what do you think are children and young people's current experience of family violence services? I'll go first to Liam, and then we'll just, if you don't have anything to say yet, we can come back. But yeah, go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tash. I think it's pretty fair to say that it's pretty few and far between. And I mean, it's not helped by the fact that, as Georgina touched on, there is a lack of resources and funding, and the sector is spread incredibly thin. But I know that experiences can differ wildly from service to service, from refuge to refuge, and from state to state. I know for me personally, when I've used services in Victoria, they've I think their experience in terms of dealing with children was pretty poor. I was just sort of dealt with like an extension of my parents. But in Canberra, it was much better for me personally. So yeah, I think, but then again, that's just my experience, and it differs wildly from person to person, and that's all I've got to say. So I'll chuck to anyone else if they want to add anything.
Thank you. Yeah, Lachlan, you got your mic off?
Yep. So, something I found, me being in Victoria, definitely I could stand for feeling like an extension of your parent. You really don't have much of a say, and when you do, it's not often acted upon in a meaningful way. And then also there's the limitations with time, being that you really don't have much time to talk to people in the services. I only got about 1 hour sessions, and it's just very difficult to convey what you want to say when you haven't got much time. Plus the response time is really slow. So yeah, and then again, just not feeling very heard. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Lachlan. Georgina, was there anything that you wanted to add to this?
Simply to reinforce that message from the children and young people who have participated in our research, mentioning that they needed more time and space, and to feel that their own voices and views were being listened to, and that those voices and views and experiences were often different to those of their parent or carer and their siblings.
Thank you. Was there anything else that any of you would like to add before we move on to the next question? Cool. Thank you. So how were you involved in the Voices for Change project, and what were your experiences like? I might throw it to Lachlan again this time.
Yeah, so I participated in the children's activity, which gathered data for children in my age group. I think that was designed by Tash and Kira. So then I did that, and then I did a second phase of data gathering and researching, which was looking in depth into the answers and feedback we got in the original phase. So just going in depth into all of that. So yeah.
Thank you. Liam?
Yeah, so I was involved in helping with the creation of the tool alongside Tash and Kira and Georgina. Yeah, I found that it was a really nice, fluid experience that was different to a lot of things that I'd experienced in the past.
Thank you. Yeah, and similar to Liam, I was also on the advisory group working on the how the survey would look for children and young people. Georgina, I think you've kind of explained what your role is, but would you like to go into more depth?
Oh, sure. So I was the lead chief investigator of this project, and worked together with researchers from Swinburne University, Safe and Equal, and the Centre for Excellence, and also very closely with Tash, Kira, Lachlan, and Liam and Millie on the young advisory, members of the youth advisory group. And I've learned a lot along the way about co-research with children and young people.
Cool, thank you. So at the start of the project, there was some feedback that was given from the lived experience members. So Georgina, did that impact how you worked with the young people for the rest of the project?
Absolutely, yes. So I can talk a little bit about the first project advisory group meeting. And this is something that Tash, Liam, Kira, and I have reflected on in an article we recently had published together. So the first advisory group meeting, it was an online Zoom meeting. There were 16 people in this virtual room, 12 of whom were adults. And then there were Tash, Liam, Millie, and Kira as the young people. I went into that meeting with nervous, perhaps naive optimism that this was going to be a very safe space for the young people, and a space where they felt that they could share their experiences and insights into the project. I provided some child-friendly documentation about the project ahead of time, And as that meeting progressed, and it was clear from the young people that they were not comfortable and it was not a safe space for them, not only being outnumbered, but also just navigating those power imbalances between young people and the professionals in this Zoom meeting, in this room. So after that meeting, I really felt quite deflated, and I felt that I'd let down the young people who had come on board this project to offer their expertise and their advice. And so I was very grateful to Tash, Millie, Liam, and Beck, their support person at the time, meeting with me to have a debrief, and a very honest debrief about what didn't work in that meeting. And from that point, I think that was a real turning point in our collaborative research relationship, because we were able to have that open discussion about what the children and young people needed. And I wanted to make sure that that happened. And so that's where we decided to set up our own youth advisory group, which was just with myself, Tash, Kira, Liam, and Millie. So I'm happy to leave that there from my point of view, but to open it up to others to share their experience of that.
Thank you. So Liam and Lachlan, how did you experience this? If you did, Liam, given that you were in a different area, and Brent, what changes did it make that were different or that were better?
This is the change from the first meeting into the second meetings, that is.
Yeah.
So I think for me personally, like the first meetings where it was very adult centered. I think it was very hard to get a word in as a child. I think it's a necessary fact that needs to be accepted that regardless of how articulate or well-spoken a child is, there's always going to be somewhat of a power imbalance between children and adults. So I think a space definitely needs to be made for those voices to be heard. I think in that first meeting that wasn't so well done, but in the second meeting where it was much more it was much more fluid, I think it was a much safer environment, and that might be something to take away for other experiences and other uses. But that really helped me personally in being able to just talk freely and being able to come up with ideas and feedback that I don't think I otherwise would have come up with in the larger group.
Cool. Thank you. Lachlan, did you feel like the space that you entered, because you weren't part of the advisory group, but did you feel like the space that you entered in the research with Georgina was felt like it was a space where you could share like what you needed in a safe way?
Yeah, so doing the online activities, I think it was a very safe space. Obviously, doing a survey online, you don't have the power imbalance of adults and children. But also it did have limitations in actually conveying how I felt. But yeah, I did enjoy, and I do think that what I participated in did make a lot of sense and was a safe space for me to share.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cool. So we'll go on to the next question. Do you think there were things in the project that can be translated directly to practitioners and researchers working with children and young people? I might throw to you first, Lachlan, again, if that's okay.
Yeah, so something I really noticed, especially for directly to practitioners, is the importance of making the child almost like your friend in a way that, as Georgina touched on, you can trust and you know that they're there to support you and not just interrogate you constantly. So having a practitioner as a friend is such an important thing. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Liam, what about you?
Yeah, that's a really good point from Lachlan there. And I think I'd just like to add that the notion, as Georgina mentioned in the slides, of there's no one size fits all, and that it's very hard. I mean, it's nigh impossible to have one model that will work for every single child, because every single child experiences and processes, and then yeah, just processes what they've experienced differently, and their needs are different. But yeah, I think I'd just like to echo what Lachlan said about making sure you build a rapport with the child. I think that's one of the most important sections of working with a child, because that trust, if it's not there, it won't, like, things won't be disclosed by the child, and when you're coming out of an environment of walking on eggshells and no trust, having someone that you know that you can trust is life-changing.
Thank you, Liam.
And if I could also add to that as well, the importance of as well recognizing every child is different. Even in very similar cases, like me and my little brother Ash, we did exactly the same stuff, exactly the same experiences, although the way we convey and the way we tell people about it or share our experiences are very different. And it took Ash a lot longer time to open up about himself.
Oh, thank you. Georgina, is there anything else that you want to add to this question?
Yeah, sure. From the researcher perspective, a message I think could be translated to practitioners is to not be afraid to engage directly with children and young people, and to listen, to actively listen. That was something in being able to share my experience of the first meeting not going so well, but being able to have that open conversation with young people to get our collaboration back on track was something. It was a steep learning curve, but something that has helped me to develop the confidence to engage with children and young people. Something that came out of the practitioner survey from this research was that quite a lot of practitioners told us they felt they lacked the skills and the confidence and training to support children and young people who have experienced family violence. So just that message of being able and developing that confidence to speak to children and young people directly, and also hopefully the Change Children's feedback tool can help support that process.
Cool. Thank you. I think as well, like just off the top of this conversation as well, it's really important to add that I think both with researchers and practitioners, there's this fear that you'll re-traumatize a child or young person, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that that child or young person's already experiencing that situation. They live it every day. And a lot of the time they just want someone to actually listen and act on their voices. And by not speaking to them because of a fear of re-traumatization, you may actually be putting them in a worse situation later on, where they may not engage with that service or even any future research again. So yeah, is there anything else that anyone wants to add to this question before I move on?
Yeah, just very quickly. I think what I'm sort of getting out of all this, just from this conversation, is that we really need to understand that children are people too. And by imposing ideals of what you think the child needs or has experienced, you're really limiting how much you can help them. So yeah, I think just recognizing that we as children can have valid opinions, and like and the like, just treating us like real people and not as extensions of our parents, as people in our own right, is incredibly important.
Thank you, Liam. Cool. So move on to the next question, unless anyone else has anything to add. Cool. So a topic that came up was the idea of surveys versus conversations. Georgina, you mentioned it was surprising that children and young people preferred conversations. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, sure. So I can speak briefly about the rationale for doing an online activity for the Children's Voices project. and comparing it to a current research project I'm doing that's involving interviewing children and young people. So the thinking behind the online activity, we called it the children's activity, that Tash, Kira Lehman really helped us to develop to make sure it was engaging and appropriate for young people. It contained emojis, it contained drag and drop activities, and it enabled young people to share what they need to feel safe and well and their experience of family violence services using check boxes and also open text boxes where they could write more. Now, the thinking of the research team behind that mode of research participation was that young people feel comfortable with technology, and also they would be able to complete the activity at a time and a place that was comfortable and safe for them, and particularly given the subject matter, appreciating that it can be difficult for people to speak directly about their experiences, and this was another way of enabling them to share. We found recruitment very difficult for this project. It took ultimately we had 23 children and young people take part in the activity, and that took at least 6 months to get those 23 responses from children and young people. Now, just about 6 weeks ago, I started a new research project focusing on children's participation in the family law system. And in the past 6 weeks, the research team and I have been able to do 30 interviews with children and young people. And those interviews, some have been in person, some have been on Zoom. But just comparing the recruitment strategy and the ability of young people and willingness of young people to open up and share their experiences by talking to a researcher has been quite remarkable. And some of the young people have said to me, "Oh, this is the first time someone's actually listened to me." And that's been really humbling, that young people feel listened to and heard and have been willing to talk. And I think, again, comes back to that point of the importance of listening.
Thank you. Liam and Lachlan, is there anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, so I think the ability to talk to an adult who's prepared to listen and that is going to use what you say for the greater good is a really powerful and inspiring idea. And it's just really nice to feel heard, and especially for younger kids as well. I think it would be a lot easier to just say what you want to say to an adult than to type it down and have to word everything right. So I think having someone prepared to listen, even briefly, just online, is really powerful and nice to have.
Thank you. Liam?
Yeah, I've not much to add. But I think, yeah, just having that human connection with someone else that you can trust is always going to be better than staring at a cold blank screen and typing away at a computer to like questionnaires. So yeah, just absolutely want to echo what Lachlan said there.
Thank you. And I think just really from my perspective as well is that a lot of young people that come from like a child protection background generally have a lot of lack of control in their life. So being able to have control over their story is really, really important. And that might mean that they would prefer a conversation over a survey that limits responses, I think, which is kind of already mentioned. But we'll go on to the next question now, which is our last question before the Q&A. What do you think would be important for researchers and practitioners to know when working with children and young people who are accessing services? So I might go to Georgina first.
Sure, thank you. So the main message that I've taken away from this project and other research I've been doing with children and young people is that children and young people have unique, distinct needs, and they know what they want, and we need to listen to them. That's the message I hope that we can take away from this research about the importance of appreciating children's right to participate in decisions about their lives.
Cool. Thank you. I'll throw to Liam.
Yeah, sort of just touching on everything that I've talked on throughout this whole panel, but Yeah, I think the big things to me are recognizing that children and young people are people in their own right. Our opinions are just as valid as anyone else, and they should be treated as such. But noting the fact that every child's the way you talk to every child needs to be specific to that child. Talking to what Lachlan said and a little bit of my own experience, even children that experience the exact same things will have vastly different experiences, and that can be because of age or because of different dynamics, such as stepchild or biological child. So yeah, just treat us like real people. Make sure that you really build rapport with us to ensure that you're giving us the detailed help that we need. And yeah, that's all I have to say. I'll throw to anyone else that wants to add anything.
Thank you.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, so it was, what do you think would be important for researchers and practitioners to know when working with children and young people who are accessing services?
So yeah, just touching on everything we've talked about, thinking about, what they might feel in that moment, and as well as listening to them without judgment, and taking the time to understand how they feel and what they're looking for in the service. Because I think children often aren't given enough opportunity to speak, and there isn't enough action on that. So just allowing time for them to do that, and yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything else anyone wants to add before we go to the Q&A about anything that we've spoken about? Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. So I'm not sure how we go about this Q&A, but I'll just do a quick look through the questions, and yeah, I'll ask you guys some things. So just go back through a bit. So
So we've got a question for Liam.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah, sorry, I just saw it. I'm just scrolling as I'm on looking through things. Sorry about that. So Liam, you mentioned that Canberra were much better for you personally. Are you able to share what you found was different or that was better in Canberra?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was dealing with services in terms of refuges. In Victoria, my refuge didn't have enough beds. The toilet didn't flush. It wasn't really great. I wasn't talked to at all. There was just this whole like really fearful tone. It wasn't great. But in Canberra, when me and my family fled up there, it like I was talked to one-on-one by a service worker, which no one had ever done to me before in Victoria. They tried to make me as comfortable as possible. I think they even came and brought us little morsels of food and like snacks. So that was really nice. But I think what was really striking to me personally was that I was treated like a real person whose experience was valid. And yeah, I think also a little bit of a side note, but being talked to one-on-one was also really important for me because when I was talked to in front of my other family members, I would self-censor because I felt that I needed to, I guess, protect them from the burden of what I had seen. But being able to talk to a worker one-on-one really freed me of that. And yeah, it also just where we were staying was much nicer. We had enough beds and the toilet flush for starters. But yeah, so that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Liam. I can't see any more questions in the chat at the moment. Oh wait, no, there's a Q&A one. Okay, so well, suddenly we have a few. So someone asked, what advice do you have for services who exclude children and young people from accessing support because they are still living with their parents or use violence? How do you think we should manage risk safety in these situations? That's a big question. Does anyone want to respond to this?
I think you should always be there for the child if they're in a very bad situation. It can be a lot more traumatizing if you don't get in early. In my case, it took a couple years for them to respond, and if you can't get in there early, then it's going to keep getting worse, and children will feel very excluded and very isolated. And so, yeah, you really do have to go in there, probably doing it in a space without adults, without their parents, obviously to negate bias. But yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Lachlan. Liam or Georgina, do you want to add anything to this question?
I was just going to add from the perspective of our practitioners and a child who took part in this project, the Children's Voices project, that family law orders requiring children to spend time with the person using violence was identified as a barrier to children accessing support, and also the need for consent from both parents for a child to engage with services was also another barrier. So I think just considering the interaction between the family law system and family violence, and given the prevalence of family violence in family law disputes, it's something that we really need to focus on, listening to children in the system to enable them to access that support.
Thank you. Liam, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think Lachlan and Georgina have done a really good job there.
Cool. Thanks. So how did you find the communication between the family law and the criminal law systems, and from practitioners in the area? If that's a relevant experience for anyone.
Yeah, so my mum and dad had a court battle for custody, which is technically still going today. And the communication wasn't very good during that. We had a lot of issues with bias, and my dad liked to lie and stuff. So, sorry, my brain's kind of gone down.
That's all good. Cool. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to say about this question? Cool. I'll go to the next one. I can see how important it is to build a rapport with a practitioner, but what do you think we need to do to ensure that children and young people are comfortable about reaching out for help? I'd like to see a world where we don't have to wait for police or social services to get involved before the voices of children and young people are heard, and they feel there is no support. There is support out there for them. Does anyone want to answer this question, or would it be best if I just go read that first part again? Read the first part again?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a big question. I can see how important it is to build a rapport with a practitioner, but what do you think we need to do to ensure that young people feel comfortable about reaching out for help?
I can just sort of add on to this. Yeah, I think I don't know. It's a tough question to answer. But I think making just yourself known, maybe, and just continually showing that it's there. I know that, like, well, I mean, obviously I've gone through the gone through the system, but with some of my friends who are my age, who haven't gone through the system but have experienced similar things to me, they have no idea that much of the sector exists, or what it does. So I think that's something that definitely needs to be addressed. But yeah, I think just really just getting your foot in the door is the first step. And then you can just build your way from there, and to making sure that children feel safe enough to flag that they need help.
Thank you, Lachlan. Oh, sorry, Liam. Go, Lachlan.
So to that, I think providing a safe space for children to talk about their parents involved is very important, because as Liam touched on, it's really it's hard. It's good to have a one-on-one connection, and it's hard to talk when you have to sort of self-censor, or you're wondering, what's mum going to think, what's dad going to think, what's this person going to think if I say this and that. So yeah, having the opportunities to speak alone and making it very publicly aware that you can do that.
Thank you. Georgina, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, just very briefly, highlighting the connection between children's participation and their access to information. And I think coming back to Fiona's comment about ensuring young people feel comfortable reaching out for help, I think it's important for children to know where to get that help and to understand and have information available so that they can reach out, because our children's activity responses showed that young people were given information, but a lot didn't understand the information that they were given about the family violence support. So just keeping in mind that children need accessible information to be able to reach out for help.
Thank you. I don't think there's any more Q&A questions. At least not that I can see. I think we've answered pretty much all the ones that we have. So I think we'll end the panel there. So thank you, everyone. It was really informative, and I really enjoyed hosting this. So yeah, thank you. I'll pass back to Georgina.
Oh, thank you. And Tash, if I might ask you a quick question. Based on your experience. So Tash, you've been a brilliant advocate, young advocate for many years. Have you noticed a shift in respecting children as victim survivors of family violence in their own right over the time you've been advocating for change?
I think that's a bit of a complicated question to an extent, because I think I feel like I've seen a bit of a shift specifically in research, to an extent where, like, I have been involved with stuff where children and young people's voices are more heard, but that's generally more in the mental health sort of setting, and in the project that we've been involved with you, Georgina. And I think that we're having a lot more conversations about language and the need for language, like, like always using like the term like victims in their own right, children not as witnesses but as direct victims of violence, like primary victims. And we're having like a lot of conversations about the need for children and young people to be seen as victims in their own right, that sort of stuff. But I don't think we're really seeing it in practice yet. Like, there are bits and pieces, but I think we're still quite a while off actually seeing it in practice and really working so that young people have like a more, like even out experience of being actually seen as victims in their own rights. And like some areas are doing it better than others at the moment. Like, I would say probably the courts are an area where it's not really happening very well, but I'm also not like particularly directly involved with courts in a lot of my work. So who knows, maybe that work's happening. But I do think that we're still at the early stages of really seeing children and young people in their own right. And I think things like this, the tool, is another step forward to that happening. Oh, sorry.
I'm muted. Yeah. Thank you, Tash. And there are a lot of comments in the chat there highlighting how valuable this conversation has been, and thanking you all for your advocacy and sharing your experience. There was a comment there that it's been the best, Cathonia said this has been the best hour of my week. Thank you, Tash, Liam and Lachlan. It might have been,
Thank
was there a hand up there for a question? One question? No? If not, did Lachlan and Liam, did you have sort of anything else you wanted to share? Yes.
Yeah, if I can just jump in. I'd just like to say a huge thanks to you, Georgina. This was like massively different to everything that I've done this whole project. And I think a lot of that is on your back. So thank you. This has been really good on my end.
Thank you, Liam. Really appreciate it.
And adding to that, I'm also really appreciative to the people who made the activity I did, and I'm really thankful to have my story heard and to put it out there for the better good. So yeah, thanks so much.
On that note, we
Thank
can wrap up with 5 minutes to spare. So thank you again, everyone, for sharing in this this launch and celebration of the Children's Voices for Change project, and acknowledgement of the work that still needs to be done, but also thank you again to Tash, Lachlan, Liam, Kira, Millie, and all the other young people who have contributed to this research. Thanks again.